Locker Room, with all the sports news you need, live.
Very good evening to you, and welcome to the Locker Room, a slightly different Locker Room tonight as we look ahead to the Scottish Cup semi-finals. And you lucky people will be here all weekend. We'll be doing it tomorrow at 11:30. We'll be kicking off with Hearts Aberdeen, and then on Sunday we'll be here for the St. Johnstone Celtic game in the Scottish Cup.
Up there.
Yeah, I got my St. Smith's Cup, but never mind. It's a Sunday, so somebody upstairs might forgive me for that one. I'm not sure. So we've got a busy show. Get your comments coming in, but on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X, as I say nowadays. Get your comments coming in, and we'll look ahead to the championship. In fact, there's a big game tonight. Joined as always by Robbie, Alaska, and Telford. You may remember Telford was here when we done Telford Grey, when we did youth football special a few weeks ago. And if you haven't watched that show, please go back and watch it. Telford was a star man on that show. I was just a warm-up, but hey ho. I thought we could say that just before Robbie gets in there with that comment. So before we kick off with the first semi-final tomorrow, Telford will be interested in this one. Hearts and Aberdeen. Robbie, are you looking forward to? I know your team's not in the Scottish Cup this weekend, but are you looking forward to a big weekend of football?
I think it's always better when you're a neutral getting into these semi-finals. I mean, I can only imagine how somebody like Alistair's going to be feeling during the Celtic game, especially if it's tight during the game. So being a neutral, obviously Alistair, I know yours will be different, but I quite fancy penalties in both games. That's what you hope for neutral. That's what you want. So we'll see how it goes. But like the Scottish Cup's always entertaining. But one thing I will say as well is, since the last time we've done a show, congratulations to Arbroath, who have won League One. They've wrapped up their title very dominant as well in that league. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on the Championship next season.
Okay, let's dive into the first interview of the evening. Then we've got a few interviews to go through. So first of all, Robbie spoke to Barry Anderson, the Hearts correspondent at the Evening News this morning, and obviously Robbie was speaking to Barry about all things Hearts, and this is the interview that he'd done.
Of course, the Scottish Cup semi-final. Bearing on the disappointment of last week, how do you think the players and the manager react to this and sort of bounce back for this big game? Because it's not just Hearts going in to play the bottom 6 games. It's a pretty big game. It's a semi-final. So how do you think the players and the manager will sort of treat this and try and bounce back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think motivation should be a problem for them, because it is their biggest game of the season at the end of the day. Season pretty much rests on what happens at Hampden on Saturday. Last week was obviously disappointing. Missing out on the top 6 for them is pretty catastrophic. Let's not kid on. But you've got a chance for some quick redemption if they can win the Scottish Cup semi-final and get to the final. Then it keeps the season alive. It keeps the chance of a trophy alive. Keeps the prospect of European football alive. So there's something there just for the supporters to look forward to for the rest of the season. So I think any Hearts player, manager, coach will not have a problem getting themselves up for this game on Saturday, and nor should they.
Yeah, and just on, Neil Cratchley, obviously he's been pretty much the talk of the hour the last few weeks. Do you think he's under pressure coming into this game on Saturday?
Well, you can see yourself from some of the comments that fans make on social media. I mean, I know that's not always the best barometer, but it's quite clear with a number of comments that fans are unhappy at the moment after last week, and just the general performances and results this season that have left Hearts in the bottom 6. It's not an acceptable situation. Naturally, the fingers then get pointed at the manager. Neil Critchley's been in the game a long time. He understands how it works, and he puts pressure on himself to do better. That he's not daft. He knows that Hearts should be at the very least in the top 6 in the Premiership, but it's not happened. I think a lot for him rests on Saturday. and how Saturday goes. The outcome, if it goes positively, then, as I said earlier, there's a little bit of redemption there in terms of the eyes of the fans. I don't think it makes up for not getting into the top 6 if they get to the cup final, but it eases the pressure a bit, and that would be important for Neil Critchley as much as anybody.
Yeah, in terms of the team sheet, Critchley's used a couple of different formations. Do you think he'll move away from that diamond formation that he's been playing in recent weeks to, maybe a basic 4-4-2? That football, it's not an overlay, it's quite a basic game. I feel like some managers maybe try and, overstyle it a bit. Do you think Critchley should maybe just stick to the basics in terms of team sheet?
I do think he'll move away from the diamond for this match. Whether it goes with a back 4 or a back 3 and wing backs, I'm not entirely sure, because I think there's pros and cons to both setups. I would he's only played a back 3 once as a Hearts manager, and that was at Celtic Park, and it didn't go particularly well. They were 3-0 down there fairly early on. Game was done by half time, so whether he goes with that again in such a big stage, I'm not sure. I think what Hearts do need is pace. They need to get their quick players into the team and utilise the pace that they've got in wide areas, and they also need to have pace in the fullback areas, whether they play fullbacks or wing backs, because that's where Aberdeen have a lot of threat. Keskinen and Morris on the 2 flanks are very quick, they're direct, and they can cause a lot of problems. So keeping them quiet is as important as what Hearts might do in an offensive sense.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about that. Obviously, you're playing Aberdeen. There's no hiding away for what's a good season Tillina's had in the job. Do you think, particularly in Hearts' backline, they'll be able to capitalise on these sort of players, and try and prevent them from scoring? Because it is a really good attack that Aberdeen do have. Keskinen, as you said, Morris, Kevin Nisbet through the middle as well. How important is it that the backline are on their game in this game? Because it's a very, very good Aberdeen attack.
Definitely, it's important that there's synergy and unity in that back line at Hearts, because one player sleeping or getting caught out of position, not tracking a runner or whatever, and they will get punished, because, as you say, the threat out wide, Morris and Keskinen is, they're lightning quick, and if you, in the space that they've got at Hampden, if you allow them to knock the ball and run you, then they're going to test you, so you have to have pace to cope with them. And Nisbet's got a little bit of everything up front. He's fairly mobile, he's got a bit of physicality, he's decent in the air, he can score a goal, he knows where the goal is, so he needs to be kept quiet as well. It's a really even game. It's one that I'd struggle to predict at the minute. We couldn't actually split Hearts and Aberdeen. I think probably at the minute I would edge towards Aberdeen before the game, purely because of their league position and the fact that they're scoring goals. They've got, they're in a reasonable bit of form. Whereas Hearts, no goals in the last 3 games going into a National Cup semi-final. They're not great statistics, so they certainly have to address that.
Yeah, and just finally on the 22, I think just over 22,000 fans that are making a trip to Hampden, how important is it they get behind the players in this game? Because, it's obviously, they've got every reason to be frustrated after last week, but, this, as you said earlier, this is a big chance for the team to make a cup final.
Yeah, and I think they'll realise that. The Hearts fans aren't daft. They know that their season rests on what happens on Saturday, and turning up with a negative mindset, as much as they'll be disappointed and frustrated, that isn't going to help anybody. So they will get behind the players, no doubt. As soon as they're out that tunnel, there'll be the noise decibel level will rise, and they'll be right behind them from the start. There's no question that Hearts will have a huge support there, and there'll be a noisy support that will give them plenty backing. So they have to respond to that when the game starts. And for me, get out the blocks quickly and get themselves on the front foot against Aberdeen. I don't think it's going to do them any good to take an approach that they might take against Celtic or Rangers, for example, at Hampden, and try and sit in for the first 20, 30 minutes and frustrate and, stifle the opposition. I think they have to get out their own game plan, start quick at a high tempo, try and dictate the play, and take the game to Aberdeen and see if they can get an early goal. Because the first goal, I know it's the old cliche, but particularly in games like this when there's not much between the two teams, first goal is hugely important. Yeah.
All right, Barry, thank you so much.
There we go. That was Barry Anderson talking to us, talking to Robbie this morning. Before we bring the rest of the guys in to discuss the Aberdeen Hearts game, let's have a preview from the Aberdeen point of view. So yesterday I sat down with freelance journalist and Aberdeen fan Robbie and Ratty. Robbie worked for the Glasgow Times and the Glasgow Herald, but on this occasion he's a Don fan. So let's hear from Robbie and let's see what he feels about tomorrow's game against Hearts. So, Robbie, another semi-final for Aberdeen, but only this time I think you would want to go one step further and into the final.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. At least we're not playing Celtic this time, because I think a lot of Aberdeen fans have still got nightmares from the last appearance at the National Stadium. This time up against Heart of Midlothian, you would think on form-wise, Aberdeen are the favourites, but we all know these clashes between the sides are never go too far in one other team's direction. And I think the concerning thing at the moment for Aberdeen fans is the team's bottle. I think that's 7 times now after the Rangers game at the weekend that they've conceded a goal after injury time. And you just hope, if Aberdeen do get in front, start on the front foot, hopefully a wide pitch with Shane Morris and Toby Keskinen either side, Aberdeen can start with momentum, get ahead and keep it going. Because, Michael, the problem that I think Aberdeen fans have got is lately Jimmy Tillian, as much as we love him and we've had an amazing season, I suppose, under him. We've been to Hampden already and faced Celtic. We're still in the European race after finishing bottom 6 last season. And obviously got the Scottish Cup semi-final, but a few of the substitutions and tactical things in-game have been a bit indifferent lately, and you really hope that if it is tight and going to go all the way, that he gets it right and plays the right personnel on Saturday.
Just going back to the game very quickly, last Sunday, Robbie, I know you were at the game, but I must have felt that a defeat for Aberdeen because they put so much into the game. But also, you were talking about the subs as well. I don't know why Jimmy Tilling changed it. That he took off, was it Keskinen, you said, and Morris as well. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember was it 2 seasons ago when Jim Goodwin was there, he'd done the exact same thing. He
And
took
Scott
off.
Arfield scored a double.
Yeah, exactly. And Aberdeen was miles ahead that night as well. And Aberdeen was obviously the same on Sunday. So I bet you it felt like a bit of a defeat. But at the same time, you must have been shouting to Big Jimmy, as we say in Scotland, what are you doing?
Yeah, it was baffling because I'm looking at the substitutions, and you're playing against 10 men, obviously, after Ross McCausland being sent off just before half time. And it was probably Keskinen's best game since Dundee away. He was ripping Rangers to shreds. Morris had already got Curtis on strings and was causing bother. So I can't think, other than Tilleen getting ahead of himself, thinking, wow, we can just rest these players for Hampden. It kind of made no sense because we ended the game with Nisbet, Sokla, and Debach on the pitch. It's 3 strikers, but there was no need to have all these strikers on at all because it was already winning, and there was then no service because there was no wingers. So, like, there was a lot of things that just didn't make sense. But in isolation, Michael, usually you'd be like, a draw against Rangers, it's not terrible because historically, Aberdeen against the Old Firm, the results can be a bit mixed. So you think, okay, a draw in face value, that's okay. But the way from being 2-0 up against 10 men to the second half, it was, I would say, backs against the wall because there was chances for either side. But some of the defending, I think for both goals, like simple balls over the top, things that we've seen already happen. It kind of ended Rubicic's career at Aberdeen against St Mirren with similar sort of moves. And then the goal Hadji scores, Aberdeen failed to react to Dessa's shot hanging off the post. And then, obviously, it's a great finish from the guy, but it shouldn't be allowed to happen. And I think there was a lot of lessons. If you could take one thing from that game, I'm glad it happened then, and there's still games to play for to get European spots than in the semi-final, because if it was mucking up like that and losing leads like that at Hampden, I'd be really concerned. So I'm hoping they've eradicated that errors now and don't repeat them on Saturday.
I suppose you wouldn't mind these subs, Robbie, when you're 3-1 up, but 2-1, as you know, it's a bit of a dodgy kind of like scoreline, especially going into the last 20 minutes of the game as well. But I wanted to go back to the game at the weekend as well, this weekend against Hearts in the Scottish Cup semi-final. I mean, you look at Aberdeen and Hearts, it's quite unbelievable to say that they're the two biggest teams in Scottish football, but they're the two most inconsistent teams, kind of like this season as well. What are you expecting from Hearts on Saturday?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, Michael, with inconsistency tie into Hearts and Aberdeen, because look at Hibernian, 17 games unbeaten in the league. Hearts, they started the season 2 wins, they're 2 points in the first 11 games under Naismith before Critchley came in. Then Aberdeen, obviously, an amazing start, drifted off, and then I think we're actually unbeaten I think we maybe lost 1 game in the last 10, and it was against Celtic. We're in decent form. In Hearts, obviously they had that bitter blow at the weekend, only drawn with Motherwell and hardly creating much chances to win the game in a huge match to get top 6, because a club of Hearts' stature and the money they've spent on transfers, a lot of them who have just not made the grade, to be honest, like they shouldn't be bottom 6. But then again, on one-off games, it's like we've seen where St Johnstone beating Celtic in the league the other week. The Scottish Premiership, I don't actually think there's a lot between most of these sides. So on the day, I wouldn't say I fear Hearts, because I think Aberdeen have got our own threats, and if we play a game, use our strengths, we should be able to beat Hearts. We might have less fans in the stadium, but we certainly won't have less fight, I tell you. But I just think Hearts, like Neil Critchley was saying today, that if he had been manager since the start of the season, Hearts would have been comfortably been in the top 6. But I'm not sure. I think that's just paying lip service, because I think Hearts have just been one of those Jekyll and Hyde teams throughout the season that you just never know what you're going to expect. And they've still got, obviously, I'm not like Craig Gordon's been an amazing servant to Scottish football, but relying on a 41-year-old goalkeeper probably sums up the problems, in a sense that I feel like he's been a great stopper, but he's got his flaws now, because as like any player, once you get to a certain age, you're not going to be reflexes the same as before. And it's that Lawrence Shankland conundrum as well. He's been left on the bench a few times lately, and obviously his contract's running out at the end of the season. So it'd be interesting to see if he could give a parting gift to the Tynecastle faithful. I hope not, obviously. And he's kept quiet or kept on the bench. But it's a few areas that I would think Hearts could trouble Aberdeen. As I say, balls over the top. Northsters and Dorrington are probably going to be the pairing, because I believe Tober's a game will probably come too soon for him. So it's one of these things. Aberdeen, it's a much changed team since probably January and February, where the transfers we've had kind of changing shape. But it's one thing with Jamie Teeling and the Aberdeen support. They're still united. Like we've been a bit annoyed, obviously, as I said, Michael, with like losing that. I felt like a loss drawing that game against Rangers and some other matches this season where things have just been a bit meh. But overall, I've not really seen an Aberdeen fan. Like previous tenures, we've had managers leave halfway through the season. There's been very few calls for people to say, yeah, Tilling's not the man to lead this team forward for the next few seasons at least.
Yeah, I was finally going to ask you, Robbie, looking at the team selection, and you spoke about it there. And I suppose when you look at Sunday, maybe Jimmy Tilling's, he's took away not making subs too early in the game. But do you feel as though, what do you think that the team selection will be on Sunday?
It wouldn't surprise me if he just goes for the same team that's played the last 2 games. Like, personally, obviously, I'm waiting. I think today or tomorrow they'll confirm if Mitov is fit. But the last twice, like he's the first choice goalkeeper, Dimitar Mitov. But the last twice he's came back from injury, he's taken a game or two to actually get up to speed. He's not actually looked great when he's originally came back. So I probably wouldn't tweak the goalkeeper. Ross Duhan, I feel he's a steady enough pair of hands. He's probably not as vocal in goal as Mitov. Like, you don't feel he has as big a presence, but he's pulled off some good saves, and I think it'd be stupid to then just change that important part of the defence and backline for a huge game at Hampden. The only position that I think's maybe up for grabs is like the position behind Nisbet. Like Papi Guy has been given that role the last few games, and I think Papi Guy is a handful. He started the season as the league's top goal scorer after, I think, till about October when he got injured. He started the season with a big purple patch, but he's one of these players that I think he might actually be better coming off the bench because he can ruffle up defenses and hold the ball up. But sometimes if it's not going your way, you can move a man down. And I'm only saying this because on a right-handed pitch, I kind of want players with a bit more pace, energy, pass the ball around. So I don't know if Tilleen would do this, but I would possibly be thinking of either playing Leighton Clarkson in that 10 and Shinnie and Palaversa as the midfielders, or even Dante Polvara playing as a 10, and then Clarkson and Palaversa and keeping Shinnie at left back, because I think James Shinnie, he's rolling back the years a wee bit. He's actually playing quite good at left back. The only thing people might say is on a pitch like Hampden, do you want Shinnie 32, 33 years old? Do you want him at left back instead of Jack McKenzie, who's got youth on his side and can whip in a good ball? But it remains to be seen. I think overall, Aberdeen have now built a squad, Michael, that we've actually got options. In the past, we might have went to games to Hampden. Aberdeen fans listen to this, might remember this game. I think it was against Hibs in 2011. We had Rory McCardle and Chris Clark as a wing backs trying to cross the ball in, and both of them just kept on passing it back, and they had no attacking flair to them. Whereas now, I think Aberdeen are blessed with quite a few options of players that will take on a man and hopefully make something happen.
There we go. That was freelance journalist Robbie and Ratty talking to us yesterday ahead of the Dons visit to Hampden Park against Hearts tomorrow. And if you don't need reminding, or maybe you do actually, we've got a show tomorrow. We'll be on at half 11. So I might be staying in the studio all night. Actually, some people think that's not a bad thing, me staying in the studio, and then we'll be on for all the build up of the game, and then we'll be back on at half 2 with a post match show with myself and Reagan looking ahead to looking back at the Hearts Aberdeen game. So, guys, I'll come to you first, because obviously it's a big game tomorrow. What do you think of the game, Robbie?
I think it's going to be quite an interesting one. I mean, look, both sort of journalists have both hit a nail on the head. Both teams are very inconsistent. They both have flaws that they can get at each other. Hearts have a bit of a problem trying to score in recent weeks, and Aberdeen have a bit of a defensive problem trying to hold on to leads. So it's shaping up to be a very interesting game. I think I'm most excited to see team selection, on both sides. As Robbie was talking about there's a couple of Aberdeen players that you can maybe see drop out the team. On the Hearts end, will Shankland start through the middle? I think that's really the big question. So there's definitely, I'm definitely interested to see what both teams sort of come up with during the game. I think it'll be quite an open game. I'm right in saying I think the last 2 results have ended in draws, so they're both sort of matched pretty well against each other. So it should be quite an interesting game.
Telford, 24 hours to go to the game. How's the nerves?
Yeah, to be honest, I think you'll struggle to find any Hearts fan who's really confident for a Hearts win tomorrow. Just take it as it comes. It'll be interesting. So it's like whoever's been at home in Hearts Aberdeen in the past few seasons have been like really, really strong. The away team haven't really came with a win, so it'll be interesting to see how it'll fare at a neutral venue tomorrow.
And obviously, Reagan, you'll be doing the show with myself tomorrow. Looking forward to a very exciting game for the Neutral.
Aye, Michael, looking forward to it. I mean, Aberdeen have played well this season. I think it's a more important game for the Jambos. I think if Cresswell goes on to lose this game, I think you can be potentially looking at the term tag for him, because I think that for Hearts not to get top six and to go out of a competition at this stage, I think he could be looking at potentially being fired as Hearts manager. So I think there's a lot at stake in it. And the two journalists that spoke in the first 10 minutes of the show made a lot of very good points.
And Alaska, you'll be sitting back thinking, well, if we get to the final and if we get to the final on Sunday, who would you rather play, Hearts or Aberdeen? Remember, Telford's on the show and Graham's watching, so there's no pressure.
Well, with due deference to Telford and Graham, I'll be sitting thinking, I wish we'd got Hearts or Aberdeen in the semi-final.
Well, Michael, don't forget I predicted that Aberdeen will win this Scottish Cup at the start of the season.
Yes, no, he did. Yep. I'm looking at Telford's face now, and I don't think he looked very happy with you saying that, Reagan. But yeah, we're all friends here until the game starts, and that doesn't matter tomorrow. Telford, I was saying to Robbie there as well that both of these teams, I should say, outside go Celtic and Rangers, are kind of like the biggest teams in Scotland, but they're the most inconsistent teams. Why do you think that is?
I think in particular, like in the Hearts sense, we're overloaded with too many players in the same traits, same position. And likewise, when I think of Aberdeen, maybe obviously when they went on that unreal run at the start of the season, maybe they over-exceeded expectations. They started getting the rub of the green, of the rub of the green, of the rub of the green for a few more games. And then likewise, when they went downhill, I think confidence is key in football. You look at, say, Shankland this season, his confidence is nowhere near as like Nisbet. His confidence has been up the past few months as well, and he'll be a player for Hearts to worry about tomorrow, sadly.
Do you feel as though this is the last few weeks that you'll see Shankland in the maroon jersey, or do you think you'll have faith and he'll be there next season?
Sadly, he's been a really good servant, particularly the past 2 years. This season, not as much, but I think it will be his last couple of months for Hearts.
Telford, just on, we were speaking about Shannon, but just a couple of young players that have got their contracts renewed, obviously Forrester and Wilson, both signed long-term deals. How do you feel about that in terms of, the future of Hearts? Because they're two very young, already talented players. I mean, they could be the long-term.
Yeah, it's pleasing to see, and I think in the past few years we've obviously we've got a lot of young Scottish players, but also be interesting to see the change with perhaps if the Bloom deal with the analytics, will that mean less Scottish players are getting the chance at Hearts? But they've both had good, respectable seasons for their age, and they're well due an extra couple of seasons to hopefully kick on to stay at Hearts or maybe sell on for some profit.
Why do you think it's been a kind of inconsistent season for Hearts? Obviously, when it's football terms, Telford, when a football manager comes in, we always say the honeymoon period, and obviously he got off to a good start. I think he won 4 or 5 games, and the Aggie European game caught in the middle as well. And ever since then, it's kind of went kind of up and down. Why can you? I mean, obviously you're a fan. You go over the week. Why is that? Is it the manager, or is it the team not playing for the manager, or what is it?
It's an interesting one. I think you see it at most clubs, and you're right. It's particularly the Ammonia Nicosia game. I was at a game 2-0. We had this breath of fresh air. Everyone was. I think it was just a new ideas, new freshness. But then ultimately stalls like Critchley has made a difference. I'm not saying he's made an amazing difference. He hasn't, but he's done okay. But he is treading a little bit of water at the moment.
And that's from I thought an Aberdeen point of view, Regan. As I keep saying that, I mean, it might sound like Groundhog Day, what I'm going to say here, but they seem kind of like too insistent. Teams in Aberdeen's a bit there as well, because Aberdeen, what was it, 13 games back to back, and then when they went into the semi-final against Celtic, and obviously the rest is history, and then they never recovered. But then the last few weeks they managed to pick up. So why do you think that is from Aberdeen?
I think probably they started the season very well, but as Alistair said before, like if you look at Aberdeen's run at the start of the season, it was a pretty easy looking run, and they scored a lot of goals late on as well. And I think Robbie said in the interview, Michael, like Aberdeen got beat by 6-0 by Celtic that day when all the smoke bombs were going off at Hampden. I think in terms of that match, that kind of played a pivotal role, because Aberdeen, they'd won 14 matches up to that point. They'd drawn one match, and then they play against Celtic, and people were thinking, right, this is going to be a big match. Aberdeen might beat Celtic here, and then Celtic go and beat them by 6-0. So that probably kind of shot the whole thing down in flames, you know.
Let's have a look at before we actually dive in and look at the Hearts. So the Aberdeen form getting to the semi-final. Let's have a look at the rundown of Hearts road to the semi-finals tomorrow against Aberdeen, Telford, and a lot of teams might say that a break from league football might benefit them, because obviously it's a one-off game. Do you feel as though that's going to be the way? Well, are you hoping that that's going to be for Hearts tomorrow? Because obviously, if you switch off from the league football, then you've got cup football, and you know what you're doing, because obviously if it's one game and you're out.
Yeah, hopefully, but I feel there's more pressure on it tomorrow. If a few weeks ago we bounced off with a couple of wins and then maybe even a draw, with 5th or 4th might have been a possibility. Maybe even an odd shot of 3rd, dare I say, but obviously that's way gone now. So this St Johnstone, Aberdeen, whoever, if Celtic don't win it, there's £4.5 million up for grabs for group stage football, and I believe this is the last season where 3rd place or Scottish Cup winners gets Conference League guaranteed due to the coefficient. So it's critical.
Yeah. So I mean, Hearts has all got the allocation for tomorrow at Telford. How important is that to back the team? But not only that, it's because of the early kickoff as well. Aberdeen fans will be I don't know how many fans, how many tickets Aberdeen has sold for tomorrow, but Hearts has a majority of this game. How crucial will that be to be a 12th man for Hearts tomorrow?
Yeah, it'll be massive. Our Hearts fans are one of the best supporting fan bases, and they're committed, they're loyal, go through the good times and bad times. So hopefully they're vital for us tomorrow and push us over the line.
Yep. So basically, this is Aberdeen's run to the semi-final tomorrow, and it's been very kind of like I don't know, Robbie, about looking at the run to the semi-final.
I mean, no disrespect to Aberdeen, but it's been a very any of the teams I've played, it's been a very easy run. They've got the favourable ties in pretty much every round up until now. So if you looked at the draws and you looked at the teams that Aberdeen played, they were probably the ones that you thought, oh yeah, they'll get to the semi-final if it was going to be anybody. And particularly early in the season when it was a time where very early on the cup run, Aberdeen were beating anybody. So that really helped them. But look, any team that gets to the semi deserves to be there. Hearts and Aberdeen both played some tricky ties, both played some easy ties, got through them. So it's going to be a good match up at Hampden.
Alistair, what do you feel about Aberdeen tomorrow? As I said to Robbie in the interview, they put a lot into that game last week against Rangers, but it must have felt that a defeat from Aberdeen. Yeah,
I mean, having lived in Aberdeen for quite a long time and knowing the Aberdonians' mentality towards Rangers in particular, they will be absolutely gutted at not winning that game. They'll also travel in decent numbers because they always do. And as you said, I don't know how many tickets they've sold. It's interesting they've got players coming back. Obviously, Robbie in the interview talked about Mitov. I would put Mitov in goal every single day. You put your best players in, and he's clearly one of the best goalkeepers in Scotland. Why you wouldn't play him, I do not understand if he's fit. They've got McGrath coming back, who before his injury was one of the best, well, absolutely one of the best midfield players in Scotland. If you look at his assist record, it's really, really high. Maybe a bit early for him to come back. They've got Malloy as well. So I think Aberdeen have got a lot going for them. And I don't want to upset Telfer, but I think you look at the league positions, and I'm somebody who a few weeks ago on this show was saying I thought Hearts would finish third. I thought Hearts actually were on the way up, and then of course they've kind of fallen apart as well, and that's the consistency we've talked about. On paper, Aberdeen should win it, looking at the league positions. Will they? Not necessarily. I mean, Hearts have got problems up front. I don't know what's happened to Dan. Again, just in Telfer's view on that. There's a really good player last season at Ross County. He doesn't seem to be getting a game now. I don't see Hearts, so I don't know why that is, but I'm pretty sure, Robbie with his St Mirren hat on, we'd be delighted to have a player like that in his team. I just think it's one of these ones where they know that the chances are they're going to be playing Celtic in the final. That means they've got a chance of getting decent money out of Europe. So it's an absolute go for one. If you're a Hearts fan or an Aberdeen fan, you want to see your team really hammer into this game, take it on the front foot from the first whistle. I know these are all cliches, but it's a one-off game. There's no time, in my view, for sort of punting about with the ball at the back too much. It's a cup tie. Let's go and make it a really entertaining cup game. And, on the back of that, best team will win, obviously. I suspect it's going to be Aberdeen. But what do I know? I thought Hearts were going to be third in the league.
Let's have a look at the managers, what they're saying about the game. Neil Clitsy press conference was yesterday. He said, we were disappointed last week, but we need to put it to the back of our minds because we have a good game a big game this weekend. It's a good opportunity for us to get to the final. Aberdeen is a good team, and they have been a very kind of up and down season. As for Jimmy Tillin, the Aberdeen manager, he said looking forward to it. It's going to be an important game. These are Hearts is a very good team, but we are on a good run at the moment, and we want to continue that until the final. I suppose the last word on this game would go for Telford. Obviously, you're going to the game tomorrow. So give us a score prediction, Telfer, if you can come over that fence.
Yeah, well, you always have to back your team, even if your team's a Highland League team against the top of the team. So regardless how I feel, I'm going to go Hearts to go through on penalties. 1-1.
Anyone else brave to step up to the plate?
2 each and Hearts take it on penalty.
I'll say 3-1 to Aberdeen.
Well,
Alistair.
You can't see it, but on the door behind me, there's a crest from Aberdeen University, where I spent many years and also worked there for quite a long time. I think Aberdeen will win 2-0.
Yep, I will. Okay, because it's a semi-final, I'm going to predict the score because obviously I don't do it every week because I eat humble pie every week and I'm very, very fat now. So I will sorry Telfer, sorry Graham. Barry Anderson is a brilliant journalist and he reports well on Hearts, but I'm going to say 2-0 to Aberdeen tomorrow. Are you okay, Yeah, okay. I will make sure Telfer was still here. So
Telfer, wait the Celtic St Johnstone one, I'll be like 6 and 7s, you know.
Aye.
So that's the big game tomorrow, part 1 of the locker room doubleheader. It's Hearts against Aberdeen tomorrow. Join us live for the build-up at 11:30. And the post-match show, if it doesn't go to penalty kicks or whatever, I have 2 for semi-final number 1 of the Scottish Cup as well. Let's dive into the second semi-final then on Sunday, and I'm not going to introduce this interview. Alistair's going to do it, and I never said to him off air that he was going to do it, but Alistair was interviewing a fellow St Johnstone fan on, when was it, Wednesday? You spoke to him as well. So Alistair, over to you, mate.
Okay, well, I'll do the introduction if you press the button, because obviously can't do that. Otherwise, I'll be talking here for hours and people getting bored, or even more bored than usual when I'm talking. This is an interview with the guy called Kev Heller, who actually grew up in the Wirral supporting Tranmere Rovers, and his dad moved up to Perth in the 80s. Went to Muirton Park, they lived very close to it, fell in love with St Johnstone, as you would do, and is one of the most diehard Sainties there is on the planet. So he's basically talking to me about the game. You'll see possibly some self-deprecating humour and some concern about how many goals we might lose by, but I'll ask Michael to go and press the relevant button now and you can make your minds up yourselves. Kevin, hi. We've got 2 St Johnstone fans here sitting here to talk about the semi-final this weekend. And I think the first question I've got for you is, have you got a pair of boots and can you play centre half?
Oh, thanks for having me, Alistair. Yeah, 2 Saints fans in the one place, that puts paid to a lot of the preconceptions people have about our support. But anyway, I do have boots. I was playing on Monday night up at McDermott on the Astro, and I do play centre half. However, I was viciously wiped out by a Fulham fan, and I've kind of injured myself, got a pulled muscle in the side, so I might need to just maybe sit on the subs bench for this week. So, yeah.
Okay. It does look as if we're going to have a real problem with injury. Obviously, we have a problem with injuries. I mean, how much do you think that's going to affect the team?
Well, it goes one of 2 ways, doesn't it? Either it makes us struggle, especially defensively, clearly where all the most of the injuries are. But you never know, it could be one of these ones that galvanises us, and that's obviously what we're all hoping for as Saints fans. We've got Sven Spangler's played in there, and he's done a job, but he's not naturally a centre half. He's not coming and commanding headers and stuff like that. So, but as I say, hopefully we kind of use that as a bit of a motivation that we've got a lot of good players. Let's do it for them and all that. But we'll just need to see. I've got my fingers crossed. It's for the. Yeah, let's do our best and pull off a miracle.
Yeah. Do you think most Saints fans are travelling more in hope than expectation, given that we obviously turned Celtic over a couple of weeks back. I mean, do you think people are thinking we're not going to do lightning doesn't strike twice, or do you think people think, look, we've done it once, we can do it again?
Yeah, I think it's probably a case of lightning doesn't strike twice, sadly. But you never know. But I always said when we got the 2 ties against them in such close, even though it means potentially getting relegated, I'd rather win the cup. So the cup win, if you got to pick one of the two, I was always going to pick the cup. So yeah, if it is lightning only strikes once, I'm pretty gutted it was the league. But if we stay up, it's okay then in the end.
Sure, that's interesting, because I must admit, I would probably take the opposite approach. I would almost rather say, look, you can get beat 10-0, but by Celtic in the cup and stay up. I would take staying up, because we won a cup. In fact, we won more cups, dare I say it, than quite a lot of clubs recently. So,
yeah.
But each their own from that point of view. In terms,
I kind of think, that in 15, 20 years' time, when you look back, you're not going to go, remember that time we were in the first division for a few years, but you will remember the time you won a cup. So
yeah,
that's it. So, and then we're in the top 10 cup winners. Then the top 10 teams have won the most trophies if we were to win it again. So that was my thinking.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I think I'll be honest. I was wanting Hearts or Aberdeen. I actually think we could have beaten Hearts or Aberdeen. I'm slightly, hope rather than expectation is the way I'd put it. But
I'd rather get beat 10-0 in a semi-final than in a final, though. So,
well, that's true. Yeah.
Nobody remembers a semi-finalist. So, yeah.
No, that's true. And obviously at Tanneries on Saturday, we actually played all right without ever really threatening towards the end. I mean, we've got strikers. Do you think the manager has actually got the best formation sorted out in his own mind, or is it just a game-by-game thing?
I think it probably is a game-by-game thing. At Tannadice, I thought we were maybe a bit late to start really going for it. I'm a fan that likes the way we play. I like the possession. If we've got possession, the other team are less likely to score, although that can sometimes go against us. But there's also the fact we can build the play up and get to the attacking positions, but we also need to be a bit more urgent about it more often. And the Hibs away a few weeks back, where we were 2-0 down and just looked like we were happy to have that and just play it along the back still. And the United game, again, we should have we kind of went for it for the last maybe 10 minutes or so, but before that we had the chance to go to it. And I like Simo's view on how to play it to a point, but yeah, there has to be a time and a place we need to get more urgent. And we showed that in the home game against Celtic in the league. So there's evidence that we can do it. If we can get at Celtic, we can get anybody. So hopefully he kind of sees that picture and we adapt accordingly for the remaining fixtures, because yes, getting beat during a game and still passing it around the back with half an hour to go isn't the greatest always. But
no, that's I would totally agree with you on that. There's various ways of expressing that which I cannot use on the show, which we're not allowed to swear. But I mean, looking beyond the semi-final, just very, very briefly, a $64,000 question: can we stay up?
Yeah, we can. I've always said if we got to the split within touch and distance, and when you're playing these teams, it just takes one of these teams to go on a bad run, us to go on a run, and we're safe, or at the minimum second bottom and get the playoff. And I'd quite fancy our chances. I'd fancy any team's chances in the playoff. From what I've seen in the Championship, Falkirk have kind of been the team that's flown in until recently, and they've kind of stumbled a wee bit along, but they should win the league. Another 3 below them, we saw Livingston in the last round of the cup, and they didn't overly impress me, and we didn't play well that time until Carey's wonder strike. But so I don't. If we could just claw it back to second bottom and relegate Dundee on last game of the season, happy days.
Well, listen, that would be happy days, and I tell you, if it goes to the last game of the season, they'll have to get some more defibrillators into McDermott Park, because it'll be unbearable. Listen, on that happy note, I think we've probably had more than enough of your time for this evening. So thanks very much, Kevin. Really, really good to see you again, catch up, albeit virtually, and we'll look forward to I'll maybe see you at the weekend. Got a shorter journey than you do, obviously, but travelling in hope.
Yeah.
We'll see what transpires. But thanks very
Get
much.
that best shot.
Yeah,
On the Saints.
And we'll catch up again soon. Cheers.
Yeah, see you later. Cheers.
There we go. There we go. It helps if I put my webcam on. There we go. That was Kevin, the St Johnstone fan. And before we bring the guys in again to talk about the St Johnstone Celtic game, let's hear from Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. I spoke to him about the views on the game. Yeah. So, Tino, how are you?
I'm good, Michael. How's things yourself? Not been on for a while, so looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah, no, exactly. Looking ahead to Sunday's semi-final at Hampden Park, it's going to be weird, kind of like playing Easter Sunday, but hopefully you and a lot of other Celtic fans will be not hoping for Easter egg, but hopefully to get through to another cup final.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's what we're all hoping for, and it's a game I look forward to. Obviously, there's a different or an additional narrative to this one, given that St Johnstone beat us just a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think Celtic players would need any extra motivation, but they'll have it because St Johnstone gave them a week of negativity and bad headlines and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's maybe bad timing for St Johnstone to come up against us so soon, but that's the way football goes. And yeah, as I say, it's a game to look forward to and hopefully one that we can come out the other side of.
You mentioned about the St Johnstone defeat, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, basically, and obviously this is the first chance for Celtic to get revenge after that defeat up at McDermott Park. But do you think that the St Johnstone players were more up for the game, because obviously St Johnstone kind of like free scans to Celtic, because St Johnstone thought, well, it's going to be a big payday because Celtic, Celtic's going to be like one game away from the league. But do you think, on the other hand, it kind of worked in the favour of St Johnstone to say, like, we'll go out there and we'll show them that we're not going to lie down to Celtic today, and they never done that. They won the game convincingly.
Yeah, and absolutely fair play to them. Just motivation and what's at stake in football or any competitive sport is so important. And I suppose I'm not justifying Celtic being poor on the day, but St Johnstone were and are fighting for their lives in terms of the Scottish Premiership, and they had it was all on the line there. Everything potentially to lose, and they had to really go for it against Celtic. And credit to them and their players for what they brought to the table. Celtic, of course, are we're going for the title and going for the treble. But we know in the bigger picture that losing to St Johnstone, it wouldn't have an impact on where the title's going to end up. Celtic will win the title, most likely at Tannadice in a couple of weeks' time. And I suppose human nature can kick in. And I think on that particular Sunday, Celtic's players were maybe just a wee bit less motivated, at least from the start of the game. They kind of rallied and were a bit better second half and towards the latter stages. But St Johnstone were on it from the word go. And as I say, good luck to them, credit to them. The players had a job to do, and they managed to pick up a big result. And I just wonder as well, going into this one on Sunday, Michael, how important it is to them. St Johnstone don't get to too many semi-finals. They've obviously won a couple of cups in recent years, but they don't get to too many semi-finals. But would winning the Scottish Cup be more important than Premiership survival? And I suppose only the St Johnstone players and coaches and fans to an extent can answer that question. So I don't know how they approach this one. That's a challenge for them, but it's going to be interesting, how they come at us or not on Sunday. In
terms of just touch upon St Johnstone for a minute, do you think that St Johnstone, that kind of like approach of the game will change the game plan? Because obviously they were at home, they were in Celtic faces basically for the whole game, but now that they're coming to a bigger park, you would say more of an atmosphere, more Celtic fans there as well, and a bigger park. You just feel as though that's going to play into Celtic's hands. But I suppose another way it could look at it as you never know because it's a one-off game. Anything could happen.
Definitely, and they've proven just a couple of weeks ago that they, on their day, can compete with Celtic. I think sometimes for clubs like St Johnstone and clubs at that level, to beat Celtic, you need two things to happen. Generally speaking, they need to have one of their best days and we need to have one of our poorer days. And that combined can lead to the kind of result we've seen there at McDiarmid Park. But you're right to highlight, the factors at play in terms of coming to Hampden. The surface will be far better. The surface at McDiarmid Park wasn't and isn't great. Hampden's a completely different story. So that should lean towards Celtic in terms of allowing us to play the football we want to play. It'll be packed with Celtic fans. I don't know the exact allocation that St Johnstone have taken, but it will be for 7 days. So that could play a part, but that's up to the players to respond. There is a lot of games in the calendar. I think Saturday against St Johnstone was game number 50 of the season, so there's a lot of games to play. But in terms of just that difference between a first half and a second half, again, I'm not finding excuses for Celtic's players, but motivations can come into play. That game was dead after 24 minutes at the weekend when I think it was Rio Hatate get his second on the 24th minute. Game was done, and actually it was already done at 2-0 if we're being really honest. So we then get to half time. We thought we got a fifth goal, but that was chopped off for offside. And I just think when you come out for the second half, naturally Celtic's levels might have dropped slightly given that the game was won, and Kilmarnock to a huge extent, they just camped in and they got themselves together to an extent. And so we had the debate on our show this week about the left centre half position. I think at this moment in time, Brendan Rodgers doesn't know who his best option is. And 1 week it's Trusty, Mike Navarocki, got a couple of games. Liam Scales come back into the weekend. Slightly further out, you've got young Dane Murray as an option there. And that's a question mark amongst others. I think he'll stick with Scales. The general opinion seems to be that Carter Vicker and Scales play well together. They seem to have a good understanding and a good partnership. So for that reason alone, that might be the call. The Greg Taylor renaissance seems to continue at left back. He's very much a guy that we keep revisiting in terms of discussion points. I thought we were done with Greg Taylor in terms of he'd made his decision. He was getting phased out for the season. Then he comes back in. He played well second half at St Johnstone, and he played well in the 60 minutes he played against Kilmarnock. And we're having that chat. Should he stay? Should he go? He'll probably get the nod at Hampden, a place he's very familiar with. He scored there against Rangers, didn't he, in the League Cup final? Although he gave away a cheap chance as well. So mixed performance there. They would be the key decisions. That aside, the midfield three picks itself, it's McGregor, Hatate and Engels. Up top, we'll probably see something similar to Maeda, Ida and Forrest. Obviously Jota would have something to say about that as well. But fairly settled. But in the defensive line, that's where there's a couple of question marks.
There you go. That was Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast talking to me yesterday about the game on Sunday, St Johnstone against Celtic on that one. And in case you've forgotten, we have got a show on Sunday as well. We'll be on from 2 o'clock. There we go. That's it there. Guess it that. Someone said that, just that. I can't remember who it was. Tommy Cooper, maybe. Celtic against St Johnstone on Sunday, 2 o'clock. And then we'll be live at 2 o'clock. And then we'll be live with the post-match show at 5 o'clock. Join Robin Ethan for that show. That'll be a good show. So, Alistair, what are you hoping for this game? Obviously, you'll be hoping for the same as 2 weeks ago.
I will, but as I've said on this show many times, our record against St Johnstone, against Celtic and against Rangers is not great. In the whole of our history, we've got about a 15% win ratio. On that basis, having just won a few weeks ago, it's unlikely we're going to win again. What I'm hoping for, I'm hoping we won't get gubbed. It's as simple as that. I'm hoping we play well, restrict Celtic. Obviously, if we win, I'll be absolutely delighted and also want to drug test all the players. But if you actually look at what's likely to happen is Celtic, once they lost to us, they played Kilmarnock the next week. And a mate of mine who's a Killie fan texted me, I think, about half-time in their game saying, thanks for making them angry. And it's a bit like Aberdeen in the semi-final of the League Cup. Aberdeen obviously had that good result at Parkhead previously when they come back from 2 goals down. And as I think Reagan was saying, people thought that Aberdeen would maybe give Celtic a good game, might even win it. And they got absolutely tonked. I mean, I was at the game and it could easily be much more than 6. That's what I think most Saints fans want to avoid, because I think the impact of that on the players would be detrimental. And you're really looking at a team that's needing to go in the last 5 games. Where, bear in mind that if you actually look at the last half a dozen games, our track record is better than everybody's apart from Motherwell, which is the same as ours. So it's better than all the other teams in the bottom 6. In fact, Hearts could get relegated in theory. It's not going to happen, but they could. So, yeah, the answer to your question, Michael, is I'm hoping that we play well, we don't sustain any more injuries. We really are struggling. The question to Kev about the injuries is fundamental. We have one fit centre-half. The boy Mitchell, who is far too good a player for Saints, or indeed most Premiership clubs, I think is out for the season now. You're looking at... Bozo is out as well. He's got an ACL. McClelland, the guy we got from who was at Dundee United, he's out long term. So we're looking at probably playing a fairly short midfielder with not much pace at centre back. We've got Dre Wright out, so he's a guy who could fit in just about anywhere in the team. None of this is actually looking particularly good. If you're a bookmaker, you would not be betting or putting odds other than about 500 to 1 on St Johnstone winning, I don't think. So anyway, that's probably me said enough. If we come out of it, played well, don't get beaten by too many, and it gives us hope and confidence and nobody gets injured and we stay up, I really, that would do me.
Would you say that looking back at the cup run, Alistair, if you stay up this season, and it's a big if at the moment, would you go back to that Motherwell game in the Scottish Cup as a kind of key game? Because after that game, you actually picked up a bit of form.
We did. I mean, our form, we should have signed a goalkeeper when Simo came in, and he didn't, and that was a mistake. And Dre Wright was talking to a friend of mine, he said, look, if we'd signed Fisher when we should have, we probably wouldn't be bottom of the table. I think you're right that we beat Motherwell in the Cup. We beat them the next week in the league. We then somehow or other fluked a 1-0 win at St Mirren, which I'm sure Robbie remembers. I don't think we got into St Mirren's half in the first 45 minutes. And then we had a slightly sort of sclaffed goal and then held on to the end. And actually, Sprangler was playing centre half that day because, again, we were struggling for players. You can't tell, Michael. It really is. No team, I think, has actually been in a position stayed up. So we're looking at, we've got to have if we have the commitment we had in that game at McDermott against Celtic, then we've got a chance. But we've only scored more than 1 goal about 4 or 5 times, if that, this season. So we're not likely to score many goals. It's a very, very tough ask.
Robbie, can the other Saints do it twice on Sunday?
I mean, St Johnstone can go there. I mean, by the sounds of things, Alistair will actually need to lace up the boots of one of us because they are just really injury at the back. But look, one thing St Johnstone can take into a game is they can play with pressure free. There's nothing at all on St Johnstone to go out there and win this game. All the pressure's on Celtic. What I will say about St Johnstone is even when I watched them in Paisley, and Alistair, I know that certainly the first half wasn't great, but one thing St Johnstone do really well, and Valakari I've noticed by the way he plays, I mean, you've seen it against Celtic as well. You play with, you try to keep the ball and, play with possession, but even when you're doing that, you don't just leave yourself too wide open. St Johnstone are really good at keeping narrow, keeping defensively well shaped and making it hard for teams. So I think what St Johnstone can take from the game is they can go there. I'm not too sure how many St Johnstone fans will be making the trip, but you can go there, play with freedom, know that, the pressure's not on St Johnstone in this game. This is a one-off, this is another trip to Hampden, more than I've got to see my team at Hampden. So, Alistair, I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. But so you can just go there and just play with freedom. I don't think there's any reason why, why you can't make it hard for Celtic again. I know they beat Kilmarnock, but again, that's at Celtic Park. When Celtic are away, it's always made tricky this season, and they've not even been, let's be honest, that game against Hearts, they get quite lucky in the first half, not to maybe concede 1 or 2. So Celtic aren't exactly playing like prime Celtic. So St Johnstone should take that, just go and play without pressure on you, really. I'm a bit wary of time. My score prediction, I'm going to go 1 each, and I'm going to back St Johnstone again. I think St Johnstone are going to win on penalties. I'm being optimistic. That might come back to bite me, and Celtic might win 5-0, Alistair, but I'm going to go for St Johnstone.
I'm going to hold you this. I absolutely am. Just a couple of quick things, if I can, before you go, Robbie. I mean, everybody talks about, everybody on the interviews and things all talked about the big pitch at Hampden. Hampden is the same size as McDermott. It's the same size as St Mirren Park. It's no bigger. Celtic Park's huge. It's bigger than just about everybody else's. The other thing is that your friend, the Celtic guy, talked about St Johnstone don't get many semi-finals. Go and look up the records. I'm sorry, this century we've been in shed loads of semi-finals. Stephen Anderson played about 7 semi-finals before we even got to the final. So yeah, we've actually got a pretty good record in that respect. And it's not that long ago we were down a division, played Celtic in a semi-final, got beat 1-0, and put on a really good performance. And it's that kind of spirit that will make a difference.
I just wanted to talk to you, Alistair, about Valakari. Obviously, we've spoke about him every week now when we've did the show, and I think it's like a breath of fresh air, not only St Johnstone and the St Johnstone fans, but also to everybody watching the game, because I don't know about you, but I just love listening to the guy.
I think, well, most fans, you could hear that from Kev, most fans are with him. Crucially, the owner's with him, because that obviously makes a big difference. So even if we go down, he'll stick with him. There are other fans. I was talking to a few people outside Tannadice on Saturday who were like, not so sure. Some of his signings are not necessarily any better than some of the players we had before. And that, in my view, is certainly the case. So on the other hand, some of them have been very good. And some of his signings have just been loan signings. So, of course, if we do go down, we've got to rebuild the team. But that's fairly, most Scottish teams are like that. I mean, Telfer's well aware of the problem of having too many players. We've got too many players as well. We haven't got a wage bill the size of Hearts, but we've got too many players. Interesting thing is that we've got Ikpeas, who may be coming back. He's apparently fit, although he's obviously not match fit. And somebody even suggested to me he could play at centre half. Now, that would be entertaining. So I genuinely think that Simo Valakari he's changed the way we play, and my question to Kev was really, do you think he knows his best team? Because I don't think he does. And that's partly because of the players he's got, and partly because he does tend to change the system. So we played a different formation against Celtic when we won from the formation we played previous to that. And I think that how we go into the remaining games, you can overcomplicate it. Sometimes you just got to get the ball forward, because you know what, you can't score if the ball's in your own half. And it looks wonderful passing it around and keeping possession and all that kind of stuff. But do you know what? I think that kind of football is slowly going. We've had it for years with Pep Guardiola. People are now realising that if you do that, I think in England there's something like 90 goals have been scored from turnover possession when people are trying to play out from the back. And managers and fans are just going to go, we've had enough of this. Let's get the ball out the park and win the second ball and try and score. And let's get wingers who take people on. You don't see that nowadays. All these kind of things would actually make football much more watchable. I'm conscious I'm now avoiding the subject of Simo Valakari. But no, I think he is he a breath of fresh air? He is for St Johnstone. First manager we've had with an ear ring and tattoos. He's very good his post-match interviews. The only concern I've got is in 3 weeks' time, he could be sitting there saying, yeah, we lost, we played well, we go again. But by that time, we're relegated. So I want to see more. I'd like to see more passion.
Telford, it's opposite for you watching Hearts and Aberdeen, but you've got no kind of horse from the race, as we say, if you're a betting fan. Bet responsibly, by the way. St Johnstone and Celtic, what's your take on the game on Sunday?
Unfortunately, I can't see St Johnstone picking up anything, but I would love, as a Hearts fan, I think most Hearts fans any team, if you outside of the big two in Glasgow, you want the other team to win. So also I hope St Johnstone win, but I think I can't see other more than a convincing Celtic win, unfortunately.
Reagan, you'll be going to the game on Sunday. What's your thoughts going into the game? Will this be the eve of another treble for Celtic, or do you think it'll be? Well, first of all, do you think it's a wake-up call, because obviously the Celtic never played well the other week? Give full credit to St Johnstone, right enough. They played well, but I think they will approach the game in a kind of different manner on Sunday, different system. But what about you, Reagan?
I totally agree with what Alistair was saying earlier about maybe St Johnstone have kind of pulled the bear in terms of because they got beat 2 weeks ago, because they won 2 weeks ago, Celtic want to do better this match. But as well, I just think, unfortunately for Alistair as well, I think Celtic's quality will just shine through on the match. I think Brendan Rodgers has been saying for weeks about this semi-final, because I think unfortunately, guys, the league I think the league title's been shown up since about January time. So I think all Celtic's been kind of focused on has been the Scottish Cup, and I think that's something that Brendan Rodgers and his squad will be fully focused on.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's a case of, Reagan? Do you think it's a case of, well, we're going to go out and show St Johnstone what we were meant to do that day, but we failed to do it?
I think that's probably the extra motivation, and this can be Celtic's sixth treble in 10 years. And people can look at it two ways. They can say, well, Celtic's got the most amount of money, they're expected to win trebles under Brendan Rodgers, or you can say, from the turn of the century in 2000, Celtic have won quite a lot of trophies. So I think it can be looked at both ways, but I think Celtic in general will pick up the victory overall. I'm sorry, Alistair, but I'll probably say Celtic by 4-0, maybe 4-0.
Is that half time or is that full time?
Full time.
And of course, let's look at Celtic's run to the Scottish Cup semi-final, Reagan, and it's been a weird goal season, because I think this is the first season Celtic's had the full Scottish Cup campaign at home this season.
Yeah, it's actually been good for them. I mean, the big one, as you can see there, was in the last round when they played David Gray's side. Obviously, Hibernian, they sold out the full attendance at Celtic Park for the first time in a long time. But I think in general, it's been a very good season for Celtic this year. I know we're on the show last week talking about Celtic having 6 matches where they've lost in 2025, but I think in general.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I've just realised that we put up the wrong graphic there, so we'll get the Celtic one back. But I can assure you, Celtic was at home in all the rounds in the Scottish Cup. Thanks for pointing that out to me as well. But yeah, I mean, just kind of like going back to the game on Sunday, Telford, do you think that Celtic's motivation will be like we're 2 games away from another treble?
Like all good teams, like Celtic have been, I think that they will be up for it they'll be right from the go. The off, the intensity will be there. I would love to see a red card for Celtic in the 15th minute, and then it gets a bit of a more an even game. But you never know. It's a semi-final. It's a one-off game, and anything can happen.
I think there's a possibility of St Johnstone get a player sent off would be even worse. I mean, I have seen Saints playing Celtic at McDermott when Celtic had 2 players sent off and we still got beat. So it's no guarantee. You've got to bear in mind, and so this is going to sound a little bit like I'm making excuses, but this is a club that turns over £5 million against a club that turns over £100 million. Every day of the week, Celtic should hammer us. So anything that actually is, and that applies to most clubs outside, Rangers and to a lesser extent, Aberdeen, Hearts and Hibs. It really is a question, I think, for the neutral fan. If you want to see a good game of football, you don't want Celtic to score early. You want it to go to half-time at least as a draw, and then see how it goes, because then the nerves start kicking in a little bit if it carries on at a draw, or even if it's a score draw. And at that point, it doesn't matter how much money the clubs turn over, because human nature kicks in, and then you've got Celtic players thinking, we might blow this again. And at that point, you've got a chance. That applies whether it's Hearts playing them or Aberdeen playing them or us playing them, because whoever gets them in the final, and I think it will be them in the final, that's the kind of approach they'll want. They'll want to keep Celtic as far away from their goal for as long as possible, because we saw what happened against Kilmarnock when Celtic got angry. The game was over by half-time. In fact, the game was over after 20 minutes, as the interview said.
What in terms of St Johnstone, Alistair, will find it for Valakari Thekige at his press conference because I was there. But basically, what do you think the game plan will be? Do you think that St Johnstone will take the game in stages? And what I mean by that is like 20 minutes. 40 minutes, get to half time, kind of like no, or get to half time, only one goal in it, and then come out for the second half, and you never know, because I mean, Celtic will have the majority of the fans, and obviously that the fans will get on the players' backs if Celtic aren't playing what they say the Celtic way.
Yeah, what their plan will be, I genuinely don't know, because can't read and see what Valakari's mind. What I'm pretty sure he will have done is he'll be looking at it, I think, in maybe in a different way from the game at McDermott, because he changed the formation to 4-4-2 for that. We obviously got a goal. Our strikers haven't been scoring recently. Now, bear in mind, they were really quite much vaunted at the start of the season. Kimpioka and Sidibe in particular. Now, Kimpioka is going to leave at the end of the season. He's not really, in my opinion, showed an awful lot when he's come back. Sidibe actually does make a difference. He is a really powerful striker. He's one of the few people I've seen muscle Carter Vickers off the ball. Mackenzie Kirk is not in good form. He was very poor at Tannadice. So I think you're right, Michael. His plan will be to try and get to the game in stages. Don't lose an early goal. Consolidate. My own personal belief is that if you're, and I've said this several times on this show in the past, if you're playing the old firm, and I don't know, I'm interested in Telfer's using this, you've got to actually attack them. And by that, I don't mean go gung-ho, but if you spend the first 10 minutes actually having them on the back foot a little bit, as happened at McDermott, then all of a sudden that's 15 minutes of the game gone. And they haven't really done an awful lot that's dangerous in year half, whereas you've actually put slight seeded out in their mind, and also improves the confidence of players who think, actually, we can get at these guys. What do you think, Telfer, from the point of view of a non-Celtic fan?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's finding that balance. For example, like Hearts last week to Celtic Park, we actually had chances in the first half as well, and we're a little bit unlucky in the other sense. But the more to find that balance of not going gung-ho but not parking the bus, it lifts the fans, lifts the spirits, the confidence. If you get a nice crunching tackle, then the players' intensity ups, and yeah, it does put a seed in the doubts of some of the opposition players. So hopefully we see not too conservative approach from Saints on Sunday, but either way, they've got to stay in the game for as long as they can, and whether that's a set piece or utilise like your front two, front three, or front four or five. I heard Saints have been quite an attacking team from the Sports Sound on the radio the past few months.
Don't believe what you're on the radio. So I'm not sure they go to the same games that I go to. So.
Just believe what you hear on here. Helper, don't listen to that other. I was going to say that other mob, but I bet that's what I'm saying. Regan, from a Celtic point of view, there's been the Daily Record reported that Celtic have offered Greg Taylor a new improved 3-year deal to keep their left back at Celtic Park. Obviously, the Daily Record reporting on that one. What do you make of the Greg Taylor situation? We all know that Tierney's coming back, and we don't know about Jeffrey Slope yet if he's going to be signing. But what do you make of the whole Greg Taylor scenario?
Do you want my honest opinion on Greg Taylor? Or would you like me to be...
Yes, on you go. That's why you're here for.
I've never really been a fan of Greg Taylor, to be honest with you, Michael, but and I was quite glad to see that he was leaving the club, because I think Greg Taylor, I think he's okay, but I don't think he's up to the standard of trying to do well both domestically and improving in Europe. I think I'm glad Tierney's coming in, but I was very hopeful that Greg Taylor would move on. But if Brendan Rodgers thinks it's the best thing to do, then I'm not going to I'm going to bow down to his knowledge, because I'm not the greatest fan of him, but obviously Brendan Rodgers is. So
there we go, guys. Rewind the show back 10 minutes ago. Yes, Celtic has played all their games at home in the Scottish Cup this season. Regan, it's kind of a bit unusual for a team being in a semi-final having all the games at home.
Yeah, and like I was saying about 2 minutes ago, if you rewind the show again, then I was saying about the fact that Celtic played against David Gray's side, and that was a kind of the marquee fixture of the trophy this season. So I think Celtic have done very well this season in the Scottish Cup. Obviously, as you'll see there, in the fifth round, Celtic played Raith Rovers. That was a game that Celtic were fully expected to win. And I think, like Alistair says about the budgets of both teams as well, I fully expect Celtic to win. I was wanting to get your thoughts on this, because I raised the point somewhere else the other night, and Andy Walker he wasn't having my point of view. He was saying I was wrong, right? You know, what I was saying to Andy was that if Brendan Rodgers wins a treble, I still don't believe that he should be manager of the year, because Brendan Rodgers is fully expected to win the treble. And Andy was saying, but it's still very hard. But I was saying, if you look at someone like David Gray or someone like John McGlynn, who have done fantastic jobs, if John McGlynn manages to get Falkirk to back-to-back promotions with virtually the same team that he was manager of in League One, that's some achievement. And the same with David Gray. I mean, I was on this show about January time, and I said the best thing about David Gray is David Gray the singer, you know, and you know, and that's what it was, because I remember people like Mal keep on bringing out statements saying that they back David Gray, but a lot of Hibs fans are not so sure in that. So I'm just sort of thinking, right, well, as much as you can bring in your Celtic eyes and say, well, if Brendan Rodgers wins a 6th treble in 10 years, right, he deserves to be manager of the year. But I personally don't.
Well, I mean, if you're going to make the argument that the people who win the most trophies should get the Manager of the Year, well, of course, then that's why Steven Gerrard won it and Callum Davidson didn't.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
it just doesn't make sense, Regan. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, if you go on the Scottish Football Supporters Association website just now, we've got John McGlynn being presented with his Fans Award Manager of the Year. So we're about 4,000 people voted in that. That's a lot of people going, there's a guy who's doing a cracking job. I think you're right. It's a bit like, and it makes other fans of other clubs get annoyed because they go, look, hang on a second, these guys are bound to win it. They've got so much more resources. They've got so much more money. John McGlynn's doing a fantastic job. David Gray, ditto. But I would give it to John McGlynn. Simply,
that's
you know.
I mean, that's not me taking away from my own team. I'm just being realistic. I'm just being realistic that St Johnstone and teams like that are like they're trying to get players from low league England, and Celtic are spending 10, 12 million on players and stuff. And I think sometimes because we let a lot of people just focus on Celtic and Rangers, it can kind of blind their kind of sometimes.
It was an absolute disgrace that Callum Davidson was not made Manager of the Year and it was given to Gerrard. That's nothing against Gerrard, but St Johnstone went in two. I mean, Telford, if let's say Hearts won the League Cup and the Scottish Cup together, you'd be incensed if your manager wasn't the Manager of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely. It means a lot for those clubs, and likewise, I see where you're coming from, but like Celtic have made strides in Europe in particular, and if they do win the treble, there is a very strong argument for Rodgers as well. So it's finding that balance, and Falkirk done well in the cups in the earlier season. They knocked out Hearts. If maybe ran Celtic semi close at Parkhead.
I did. Yep. And I think that point you make, Alistair, I would even go so far to say that the Manager of the Year in 2020, I think to me, it was more like Steven Gerrard that is bringing the publicity to Scottish football rather than thinking, right, who's actually done amazing this season, you know?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I know what you're saying, Telfer, and I wouldn't lose any sleep if Brendan Rodgers won it, because he has done a good job, because a lot of Celtic fans weren't very sure about him when he came back. You know? So from that point of view, you've got to say he's answered the critics. And yes, he has all the advantages. I still think, though, that John McGlynn's achievement in relative terms, two successive, and I think they will get promoted as champions, I just think that's a superb achievement for a club which actually is one of Scotland's bigger clubs, you know. And if they get back up again, that's a good thing for Scottish football.
Michael, because I think that's one of the great things about this show is that a lot of people just focus on Celtic and Rangers, and I think it's there's so much more to Scottish football than Celtic and Rangers. I get a bit bored when people just talk about this is what Celtic do. I mean, there's so many much more talking points.
I mean, I'm not just saying this because Alistair's here, but you remember, Regan, when we did the show, we were baffled that Callum Davidson never won the Manager of the Year. I mean, what else gives him make to win the European Cup? I mean, that's the first time that I've known a manager outside of the big two in Scotland and still didn't win the Manager of the Year. Now, I bet you if you ask Callum Davidson at the moment that he would get bother about it on an interview, but deep down, I know that it would be really kind of, well, let's just say annoyed. That's a polite way of putting Alistair, because obviously, I mean, another way to look at it is like to play devil's advocate, but we all know why Steven Gerrard won it. It's because he's Steven Gerrard, and Rangers fans thought, oh yeah, that's 55 titles. That's my kind of personal view. I maybe not have said that as a kind of presenter of the show, but I mean, if Callum Davidson was manager of Rangers or Hearts and they won the double, I think he would have won the Manager of the Year. Again, it goes back to Alistair that when we talk about Scotland, that Skibby Clark didn't look at St Johnstone players or Ross County players only because they're a wee club. You know, but I think he's actually, picking players out of the big three, maybe in Scotland, Hearts, Celtic, and Rangers. And if you're not in these teams, well, yeah, you're really not getting into the squad.
There's an element of that. I mean, I think more so in the past. I think in the past you would get picked, but yeah, it helps if you're playing for one of the bigger clubs and you've got more publicity. I mean, there's another element to do with these semi-finals which we haven't talked about, and I'm not talking about the fact that Celtic will lose if all the players go out for a drink with Adam Maeda. But are you aware that there's this furore about the hospitality at Hampden?
No.
Right, so for some reason which I don't know, Celtic have got a former, I think it's Charlie Mulgrew's been invited to speak to the fans in the hospitality. There's a Hearts player and Aberdeen player being invited to their lounges for that, but for some reason they've not invited any St Johnstone player. And again, that makes Saints fans just think, oh, hang on, they just think we're a wee Diddy team. Now, I don't know what the truth behind it is. I will find out in due course, because as you know, I've got the contacts to do that. Incidentally, by the way, I did actually suggest to the chief executive of the SFA that he might bring his boots because he probably could get a game at centre half for us again. But that's by the by. He did reply to say, surely it's not that bad. And I said, yes, it is. So I just think these kind of things, as you say, Reagan, they make fans of other clubs very anti the old firm, which, let's be honest, most of them are. And that's not necessarily a good thing because you want Scotland to have a higher coefficient, so you actually want everybody to do well. You know, in the same way that you want Scotland to do well, you really should want other clubs to. I'm not expecting Celtic fans to support Rangers on Thursday night and vice versa, but other clubs generally, you talk to people like yourselves, we're all quite reasonable and decent. You really do want Scottish football to do well, and that applies right across the board. You know, and the way to do that is to recognise the people who make that happen. You know, like Callum Davidson.
And I mean, I dig you. I never knew anything about it until you mentioned Darlington before we went on there tonight. And I basically said, why not invite the man that we were speaking about 5 seconds ago, Callum Davidson, because obviously he won the Scottish Cup under Tommy Wright as well, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously it's like the most successful St Johnstone manager. They got because of his cup final, they got him into European football, and I'm not mistaken, it was against Galatasaray in the first game for 1-8.
Yeah, we could have won actually, but we didn't, and it was 4-2 back at. You know, we gave them a good game. Yeah, I don't know what I mean. Telford, I'm interested again in your views on this because you're looking at it from your supporter of one of the Scotland's bigger clubs, yeah, and there is always a feeling that, you know, if you're playing Celtic and Rangers, you beat them, that's a real result. Is that the same for Hearts, do you think, or Hearts think, well, actually, no, we are not that far behind them?
No, we do know there is a gap in the gulf, but obviously we do. I feel nowadays we get sometimes more enjoyment than like a win, or almost just as much enjoyment as a win over the big two than we do over Hibs. Well, albeit our record against Hibs has not been that good in the past season and a half. But yeah, we still see them as a gap, but we would love to, hopefully, in the next few years, as I've always said that, but it's not happened, the likes of Hearts, Aberdeen and the other team in Leith, to get within 20 points, then 10 points, etc., and 5 points of second.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back far enough, Hearts and Hibs were real powerhouses in Scottish football, and actually, if you go back to the 50s, Celtic weren't all that good, and in relative terms.
1-0, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate, okay, that's sort of, people say, so what, in the long term, we're all dead. But going back to the Hearts thing, Telfer, you think, do you think that actually next season you can go and do better? Because if you look at the very first game of the season, the game against Rangers, I remember watching that and thinking, Hearts are looking pretty good here. And it's kind of sort of just fallen apart since then.
Yeah, I watched that game live, and we arguably should have won that game. goes back to some of our recruitment. I think that Costa Rican Taylor right back, everyone thought, oh, here we go, here's 4 or 5 million in the bank. This player's unreal. And Danda played class, and a few other players we've barely seen them, / they've got injured, disappeared. But that's ultimately, we should be aiming to get closer to the big two. There's no point aiming high. I'm not saying be really silly on what Danda commented, saying, oh, we can go above Celtic and Rangers. Maybe that's a bit naive, but we should go in thinking that we can claw them a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have come across this. There's an academic study, and I can't remember what the name of the person who did it was. It's buried in, if you want to go read the 114 pages of the Youth Development Report from the SFA, it's in there. And it's a really big study, so it's not like back of a fag packet stuff. And they come to the conclusion that your club's results at the end of the season, where you finish in the league, 70% of it is down to money, 20% is down to management and coaching, and 10% is down to luck. Does that sound about right? I can tell you're disappointed.
Sounds about right, aye.
Maybe the TV deal was 2% there, but I'm not sure. And that one, let's have a look at what the manager's saying as well. Let's go to Simo Valakari. He says it is a very special week because it is a cup semi-final. We've had a good cup run. Celtic will be ready, and so will we. Wait, you hear this one, Alistair. Miracles can happen, and heroes can be born. But there you go. But well done, Simo, for writing the headlines in the papers tomorrow with that one. Well done. Brendan Rogers said, we are excited about the game, and our goal is to get to the final. It doesn't matter who the opposition is, we want to win the game, and that's what it's all about tomorrow on Sunday, Alistair, about the game. But what do you make of Valakari's headline tomorrow? I can see it up in lights as well. Miracles can happen and heroes can be born. That's a classic line. That.
Well, it is Easter, so that's
yeah.
You know. I believe you guys can tell me maybe the Celtic fans can tell me. I believe Valakari, one of his last games for Motherwell was against Celtic, and I think he might have either he scored twice or Motherwell won. Was that a cup game? Does that anybody remember that? You're all for it.
I'll be able to check it, but no, I don't remember.
Is it 90s or was it?
Well, he was playing in what, the 90s? Yeah.
91. Well, was he part of the team that won the Scottish Cup against was it Dundee United, Alaska?
You know what? I don't know. I'm going to look it up.
I seem to remember. I seem to remember that fight. Funnily enough, when you're talking about Celtic, this is how good or bad my memory is. But I'm sure that final was at Celtic Park for some reason, and it was like 4-3 to Motherwell that game. But I can't remember if Seymour was playing that day.
I was at it, and it was at Hampden.
Oh, right, okay. So my memory is not that brilliant then.
Yeah. 98 Scottish Cup final. Hearts Rangers was at Celtic Park.
Well, I remember that.
Right, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
so I got my
2014
team
was as well. No, he wasn't in it. Chris McCart was playing for Motherwell. Ali Maxwell's in goal. Craig Patterson, Tom Boyd was playing. Phil O'Donnell, Davy Cooper was playing. Ian Ferguson, Dougie Arnott. And interesting, the managers of both, because that was the Dundee United one, the managers were Tommy McLean and Jim McLean.
Right, okay, yeah. And Chris can score about that. Alaska gives a quick footnote to that one. I went to a certain college, funnily enough, it was Murrow College, and one of my lecturers was Jim Griffin, who played for Murrow, he was part of the Murrow team winning the Scottish Cup. I don't know, Alice, I seem to be the Uncle Albert when they tell you stories like that, but never mind. So yeah, I mean, score predictions on this one, guys, before we jump into the championship.
I'll go first. I think Saints will have some chances. I think it will be a little bit closer than some people expect, but 3-0 Celtic.
You're not seriously expecting me to come out with a score here, are you, Michael?
Well, yes.
Yes. I would be, well, I'll tell you what I would be happy with. I'd be happy with a single goal defeat. No, that's not true. I'd be happy if we won. I'd be ecstatic if Robbie was right and it went to penalties, so I can't see that happening. I would settle for playing well on a single goal defeat. I think Celtic will probably, as Reagan said, they're out for revenge. Let's not kid ourselves. That's what they, and I could easily, if they're on form, they could beat us by quite a lot of goals. I'm not going to put a number on it because I've not got a calculator big enough.
Reagan?
I'll say 4-0 to Celtic. I think they'll score early. I think they'll score too early, and then the game will just kind of pander out. I think Celtic will want a bit of revenge, and Brendan Rodgers will be back in that showpiece final on the 24th of May. I
will go for 2-0 to Celtic. So that will be a Celtic Aberdeen final. So there you go. You've heard it here first. I've got it wrong again.
Very kind, Michael. I think Reagan's been honest.
Yeah. Well, if you weren't here, Alice, I would say 7. No, I'm 7-0. No. Okay, let's dive into the championship, guys. There's a game on tonight, actually. Livingston against Ayr. That's 8:15 kickoff. Tomorrow we've got Airdrie against Morton, Dunfermline against Packet Thistle, Falkirk against Raith Rovers. That's a 5 derby, that one. And the story of the week, Alice, I would be interested to hear what you and Telford thoughts on this one. Hamilton against Queen's Park, but the headline has already been written for Hamilton because they have been deducted 15 points, and that might mean that they'll be in. That might mean they'll be going down the division. What do you think of that decision, guys? I mean, for me, it came out of nowhere, but there you go.
Telfer, you can go first.
Yeah, I think from doing a little bit of reading on it, I've only read a couple of articles on it, but I think there was a couple of murmurings a few months ago that there was some breach of regulations. It's not what you want to hear for any club in Scotland. So I heard there's been quite a few clubs lately who have started to get the deductions, and they're 8 points behind now with 9 to play. But if you're wanting to play a team straight away, it would be Queen's Park because they have been in free fall. So it's not completely over, but it is quite bleak, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're coming back to Callum Davidson again, aren't we? Because since he's gone, they have absolutely been in free fall. Telfer's right. I mean, if you look at their form, it's just a series of red, boxes with a white L in them. They haven't won anything. If you look at the BBC, the Dunfermline aren't much better. But the people who, of course, will be really pleased are Airdrie, because Airdrie have all of a sudden got a get out of jail free card potentially, because they actually are in quite good form. They've actually only lost 1 of their last 6.
See, Alice, I would be interested to get your thoughts about obviously Callum Davidson's as a theme on this week's show. In fact, we should get him on one week as well to talk about tennis or golf, because he's very good at the kind of sports as well, and he's good at football. But when we were talking about Queen's Park in the show last week, Reagan was on as well, and I don't know if you and Telfer would agree with me, because Woody Hockey's pulling out his money, and also Callum Davidson's away. It's hard to think. They just went to Ibrox a few weeks ago and beat the biggest team in Scotland. to get through the quarterfinals of the Scottish Cup, but that's by the by. But do you feel as though that Queen's Park will be another? I'm not hoping for teams could go to the wall, but you might get what I'm saying here. Do you think Queen's Park is another kind of Gretna?
No. Short answer. I don't think they are. Gretna were special set of circumstances. If you look at Dumbarton, there is concern there because the guys, and I'll be careful what I say here in case my learned friends are watching, but the organisation that I think is supposed to be coming in as the sort of 7th Cavalry are the organisation that's caused a lot of the problems in the first place. And that's not dissimilar to Inverness. I don't think that's the case at Queen's Park. I also think that Scottish football, I don't think the powers that be would allow Queen's Park for that to happen, because Queen's Park are where Scottish football started, basically. You know, everything stems from the colours the national team plays in, all that history. You know, none of that's, you just cannot let that go to the wall.
So they're still one of the most successful teams in Scottish football when you look at trophies and stuff they've won as well. So it's, and fingers crossed the Spiders can stick around and ride it out. And also, I know there was talk of a full-time team at the moment, or was that in transition?
No, I think they're full-time at the moment, but I presume Alaska have Withy hockey or log hockey as it's known in Ceflo Escarpment. They might go back to part-time football. Am I right in saying that?
Possibly. I mean, I think you've got to remember that it's not that long ago that a lot of teams in the second tier down were part-time. In actual fact, if you go in my lifetime, there was a lot of teams who were in the top division, the old first division, who had people who were teachers and minors and all sorts of stuff. You know, they were professional footballers, but they weren't full-time. When Saints were under Alex Taunton came up, they were part-time. And then they went full-time since then. They have been since. But it's a relatively modern thing in that sense that you've got all these clubs in the second tier who are desperately trying to stay full-time because they want to get up. And can Scottish football sustain it financially? That's a very good question.
Going back to Hamilton, guys, I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, obviously, they've not got the biggest support kind of like in the world as well. And Ivy Skiggham, like enough at Thistle Park, that must be one of the worst surfaces. How many of the times have we said that on the show, Reagan? But I mean, it's not very good what's happening at Hamilton at the moment.
There's a lot of clubs in the same situation. It's quite bad to see. I was hoping they'd go over that after COVID, because a lot of clubs kind of fell under that kind of furlough thing where they struggled to pay all the kind of things they needed to pay. So, I'm just sad to see, especially Queen's Park, because Queen's Park, like you said, beating Rangers, and then obviously Withy hockey pulling out his money. So hopefully, because I remember a few years ago, guys, they were bringing in people from Holland and Leanne Dempsey. I don't know if Leanne's still there, but they were. I mean, remember they signed Simon Murray as well.
Mm-hmm.
Simon Murray was done really well for them. I mean, so I think, Queen's Park in Hamilton is quite a sad state of affairs in Scottish football at the minute.
I think one of the problems is that they may lose their ground as well. That's that. I mean, that really would. That's one thing which for Hamilton. Hamilton. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking I mean in Queen's Park there.
Sorry, that was my fault. Sorry, I meant Hamilton. I mean, if they do lose their ground, I don't think I think Queen's Park will be okay. Hamilton, if they lose their ground, where are they going to play?
Mm. I mean,
play at Sheffield.
Going back to your point, Reagan, as well. Like, as I say, my memory is not that brilliant tonight. But am I right in saying Queen's Park way when Leanne Dempsey came in? Did they not bring over what was it, a German coach or?
They brought a Dutch.
Yeah,
they brought a Dutch director of football for Ajax Amsterdam. They also brought over a lot of specialist people and specialist position officers. So it was a club that people felt was sort of on the up and try to do better. So it's kind of sad news if things are going to kind of fall away.
Yeah, Owen Coyle was his manager there as well for a bit, wasn't he?
Owen Coyle,
Yeah.
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 So you've got, I mean, it is absolutely, you know, as I said, it's where Scottish football started. I mean, they were the best club, best team in the world. So there weren't very many, to be fair, in those days, but they absolutely were. And you know, they played the English clubs. And they beat them regularly. They were better than the clubs in England at that time.
See, if you look back 2 years ago in a month's time, Alistair, Queen's Park and Dundee were doing a show off to see who could get promoted. Remember, is it Boyer, the old Dundee manager? Remember he said
Boyer.
Yeah, I mean, I think even a Celtic player at the moment, Luke, he scored the winner for Dundee to send them up to the Premier League. So I'd just be interested now because it just shows you how quickly football can change in terms of if Queen's Park would have got promoted, things could have turned out a whole lot different for them.
Well, it is. I mean, you know, Telfer's sitting here. He's the only person of the four of us whose team's been relegated recently. You know, and okay, it was on the back of COVID, and there's a lot of controversy about that. But football does strange things, you know. And Hibs have been down the leagues a bit. Aberdeen have come so close to it so many times, you know. And we've seen.
Has Aberdeen ever been relegated? Or they always done it? Because I remember reading a stat.
One time.
All right, because I remember reading a stat from I think it was Sky the other week. It says that Everton are the only team in England never to be relegated.
I think that might be right. I don't know about Aberdeen.
As far as I'm aware, I don't think they have, but there was 1 year they finished bottom, but that was the year before the league reconstruction from 10 to 12.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fans joke about that one, so we say.
No, according to that well-known font of all knowledge, Wikipedia, Aberdeen have never been relegated. But you're right, Telfer. I think there was the shenanigans. The league was reconstructed, which kind of helped keep them up, or the club down below, because Falkirk are going to have that problem as well with their pitch. You know, so there's all these things in place. Now, I personally agree with it. I don't think you should have plastic pitches anywhere near the Premiership. But
I was the one nod you on for a few weeks. I mean, obviously, it broke last week about the league reconstruction. Have you got a view on it? Because I was quite of the opinion that you need to extend the league to possibly 14 teams rather than try and reduce it to 10.
Yes, I do have a view. With my Football Supporters Association hat on, we called this right because at the time the story came out. Sorry, that's the phone going.
Is that Callum Yeverton?
That's Callum. It'll go away in a minute or two. Don't worry. Yeah, we called this right because my wife will get in a minute. Right. This just shows the show. This just proves the show's going out live, doesn't it? It's stopped, right? Yeah, we called this right because we basically said, look, this is not true. This is not going to happen. And within a couple of days, you've obviously not read the article on the SFSA website. Please go and read it because it's very good because I wrote it. And it says, look, we got this right because we knew, because we kind of talked to people who matter, that it wasn't going to happen. That doesn't mean that it won't happen in the future. And I know from meetings that we've had with the football authorities in the last month that it is certainly something which they are well aware of. The problem is, as Neil Doncaster said to us, at the risk of dropping names, everybody wants it. Nobody knows how to do it. And that therein lies. I mean, I personally would like to see league reconstruction. How do you do it when you've got, and this the reason why we said in the article that it wouldn't happen is because you just look at the TV contracts and the William Hill contract. Sky contract doesn't run out until 2029. There is no way they were going to change the league structure without the say-so of William Hill and Sky, who signed up for what they've got just now, which is 4 Old Firm games every season. So there's no way that was going to happen. You know,
And the likes of having a bigger league, and we just spoke about like Hamilton and Queen's Park there, and obviously they haven't got the biggest fan base in the world. Maybe Hamilton's got about 50 more than Queen's Park. Maybe a bit. I'm being a bit unfair there, but if you have a bigger league and say that they come up, Alaska, right, that would maybe keep them in business for like 2 seasons, because you're thinking about Celtic, Hearts and Aberdeen going there for 3 times a season, and the cup as well.
yeah, I think what I think will happen, and I can't guarantee this, but I think the SPFL are quite keen on actually, and not now, but maybe a year or two down the line, actually talking to the fans. And by that, I mean they would probably come and use us as a conduit, because obviously we're the biggest fans organisation there is. And they would use us, I hope, and again, this is what we've kind of said in the article, and this is based on conversations we've had. This is not pie in the sky stuff. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's been talked about. So you then go and say, okay, you want to have league reconstruction. You can't just ask every fan for their opinion, because you'll get tens of thousands of different opinions. We've already had people emailing us saying, oh, there's a guy emailed us with this fabulous idea, he worked it all out, and it's like, but he never made any mention of money. That's the problem. It's how you're going to maintain the amount of money, and how you're going to, at the very least, maintain what you've got now, which, remember, is a record amount, or ideally increase it. How do you get more young players through? That's the other critical thing. And that SFA report is really good. It's worth reading if you can be bothered wading through it, because it actually does tell you what's going to happen, or sorry, what is happening, and there's not enough young players coming through. So that's why I would like to have it. And if we could do a survey of all the fans, that will actually enable the football authorities at least to go and say, right, okay, this is what the fans are telling us. Then the next step is they do the same for VAR, but let's not go down that road.
I'll bring the other guys back in. Just got a few minutes left on the show, but it's an interesting debate. But I was speaking to you the other week that, well, hopefully you're hoping that St Johnstone won't win the playoff. They'll stay up and all that, and you won't have a lot of stress at the end of the season. But the likes of like the playoff final, that's on Sky. So like you've got the playoffs, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals on BBC, but when the final comes up, it's on Sky. So I mean, Sky calls the shots. It's like a magpie coming down and stealing your lunch off you.
Yeah. I think the thing is, you could have 6 teams at the bottom of an 18-team league still, vying to stay up. You've seen that in the past. I think also the Championship, you've got to look at that and go, there's a lot of clubs there like Falkirk and Dunfermline who are big clubs, and you'd like to see them having the chance to play in a better quality, better class of football. That to my mind is, how do you actually protect the important clubs in Scotland? I'm not saying the other ones aren't important, but let's be honest. Dunfermline are a big club. This is still a big club, in Scottish terms. St Mirren, St Johnstone, Falkirk, Wraith Rovers up to a point. That. How do you make sure these teams have actually got a future, and how have they got enough? How can they have enough money to come through? It's really, really important.
A couple minutes left, guys, and we haven't had your pick of the weekend in the Championship, so you can see the games there. Livy Ayr tomorrow, Airdrie Morton, Dunfermline Park at Thistle, the Fife Derby, and Hamilton Queen's Park. What's your pick of the games, Telfer?
Definitely not Airdrie Morton. I don't think there's much left to play for. I think Falkirk Wraith, because Falkirk just need that one win, and Wraith need that win to get in the playoffs. But I'm going, Falkirk Wraith.
Alistair Reagan?
I think I'll go for the match that's on tonight. Scott Brown going away to the Tony Macaroni, if it's still called that, David Martindale's team. So I think if Ayr can get a point tonight, then Falkirk would be all but confirmed as champions. So,
and also we've got a wee derby tomorrow, Alistair. It's Neil Lynn against Mark Wilson. Mark Wilson confirming against Packet Thistle.
Yeah, I mean, Dunfermline they need to actually pick up some points. They've also been helped by Hamilton. I actually think Airdrie Morton is more consequential than maybe people think, because Morton have been playing well recently. Airdrie clearly need to get points as well if they're going to get anywhere near Queen's Park. But yeah, Falkirk can win the. It's a bit like Celtic and Rangers last weekend, where Rangers go into Aberdeen. Depending how the game goes tonight, I think Falkirk Wraith Rovers, and I think Falkirk will win. That's probably the game of the weekend for me.
There you go. We're out of time, but just to say, we'll be back tomorrow eating our breakfast at 11:30. Looking forward to Telford's nervous 90 minutes at Hampden Park. Enjoy the game, Telford, tomorrow. Even though everybody took Aberdeen to win the game, but enjoy yourself. Aberdeen against Hearts, and then on Sunday we'll be back for Reagan's. It's a wee derby between Reagan and Alaska. It's Johnson against Celtic. We'll be back at 2 o'clock. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 11:30.